What if the cold night that was meant to end your life became the very night someone saved it? That was the question hanging in the silent storm as Lena Voss lay half buried in the snow, her breath fading like smoke in the winter air. The snow kept falling. It landed on her lashes, melted on her cracked lips, and clung to her shaking fingers. She lay still beside the lonely road outside Dustin Hollow. A soft red line trailed behind her through the snow, a quiet reminder of how far she had walked before her strength gave up. Her eyes fluttered once, then closed. The world around her dimmed until even the wind seemed far away. Then came footsteps, slow, steady, crunching through the thick snow. A shadow bent over her, blocking the storm. A gloved hand brushed her cheek, searching her neck for a pulse that was barely there. The stranger muttered a quiet curse, ripped his own coat off, and wrapped her inside it with careful hands, like she was something fragile he wasn't ready to lose. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her past. All he knew was this: she was not meant to die here. He lifted her from the snow, and the world shifted. Nothing about Dustin Hollow ever shifted. The town itself sat like an old scar in the Wyoming cold. One road ran through the middle, lined with chipped storefronts and a tired church that hadn't rung its bell in 5 long winters. Folks there didn't raise their voices. They whispered. They didn't open doors to strangers. They watched from windows, and when the snow came early, they shut themselves inside and waited for the storm to pass. Lena Voss lived on the farthest edge of that town, in a small cabin hidden past the old logging trail. No one went near that trail anymore. Even birds seemed too cautious to sing there. But every morning, smoke rose from her chimney. Every night, her small lamp glowed until she turned it off at the same exact hour, without fail. She lived her life in quiet rhythms, and the town let her stay that way. People said she wasn't born strange. They said the city changed her. When she came back 5 years ago with a limp in her step, a scar stretching along her face, and a coat she never took off in public, they stopped guessing and started assuming. Some whispered she lost her husband in a fire. Others claimed she was tied to something darker, something dangerous. But no one asked her. Not once. Her limp caught their attention first. Then the pale scar from her temple to her jaw. Then the way she didn't answer unless you stood in front of her, because she was nearly deaf on her right side. And maybe what kept people away more than anything was her silence. She didn't glare. She didn't snap. She just looked past you like she lived halfway in another world. She never went to church. She never danced at the harvest festival. And when the mayor's wife invited her once out of pity, Lena gave a small nod and never showed up. Kids called her the hollow ghost. Mothers told them not to stare. Men changed sidewalks when she limped by. Inside her tiny cabin, the air stayed cold even when the fire burned hot. She had no photos on the walls. No letters. No radio. Only towers of old books and a single picture frame turned face down on a shelf. Some days, she sat by the frosted window and traced her fingers along the glass, counting footsteps outside like she was waiting for someone who never arrived. But she worked hard. She chopped wood, fixed fences, cleaned barns when no one else wanted the job. She never asked for more than she earned. And she never complained, even when the butcher's son called her a freak loud enough for the whole street to hear. Then, winter came early. Thick snow piled up overnight. Roads iced. Doors froze shut. And Lena started walking every evening, limping down that long road past the shops and into the fields. Folks watched from behind curtains, wondering where she went. They never knew she was retracing footsteps that once belonged to someone she lost. Some nights, she kneeled in the meadow and touched the cold earth with shaking fingers. No one ever saw her tears, but they imagined them. In Dustin Hollow, imagination turned into truth faster than facts. The only creature that ever chose her was a dog, a brown mutt with one torn ear and eyes wary like hers. She never named him, but he came every night to sit by her door. Her only loyal companion. Pain lived in her quietly, like a small fire burning low in her chest. She carried it like a coat she never removed. Maybe that's why no one noticed when she didn't come home the night the sky opened up and the storm began. No one except the dog. He barked into the cold. He paced in the snow. But the town slept on. Thick flakes fell like ash, burying every sound. Somewhere deep in the forest, Lena collapsed. She didn't know how long she walked or when she fell. She only knew the cold wrapped around her like a final touch, and she let herself sink into it, until headlights sliced through the storm. Until a man ran through the darkness to reach her. Until she felt arms around her, lifting her from the frozen earth. His breath was warm on her face. Her eyes opened just a little, and that one fragile second changed everything. The stranger drove fast through the storm, his truck rattling over the ice. He held her hand once, checking she was still breathing. When he reached her cabin, he carried her inside like she was something precious. When she woke, wrapped in blankets she didn't remember owning, the fire crackled warm. A man sat near the hearth, elbows resting on his knees. "You're alive," he said softly. She blinked at him. The dog slept by the fire. He had a tired face, storm-blue eyes, and a scar across his brow. "You nearly froze out there," he said. "If it weren't for your dog." She tried to speak, but only breath escaped. "You don't need to talk," he said gently. "Just rest." When he stood to leave, he paused at the door. "I'll come back tomorrow," he said, "if you want." Then he stepped outside. For the first time in 5 years, Lena Voss did not feel alone. The next morning came quiet and pale, the kind of winter light that barely reached the ground. Lena woke slowly, her body heavy from the cold she had fought the night before. The blankets around her were warm. The fire still burned. The dog lay curled at her feet like he had guarded her all night. For a moment she wondered if everything had been a dream. But then she heard boots crunching outside the cabin. A soft knock followed. She hesitated. Her throat still ached. Her thoughts felt tangled. But she stood, wrapped herself in the thick blanket, and opened the door. Eli Hart stood there. He held a bowl of steaming broth in one hand and a small paper bag in the other. "You're awake?" he said. "Good." She stared at him quietly. Words came slowly to her, always had. But today they wouldn't come at all. "It's fine," he said, noticing the struggle in her eyes. "Let me put this down." Inside, he set the bowl on her table and placed the bag beside it. She watched him move around the cabin like he had been there before, though he hadn't. He was gentle. He didn't look at her like the rest of town did. No pity, no fear, no judgment, just steady calm. "You should eat," he said, stepping back. She picked up the spoon, her hand shaking from weakness, but managed a small sip. The warmth spread through her chest. Eli's voice stayed soft. "Do you remember what happened?" Quote. She paused, then nodded once. She remembered the boys following her. She remembered the words thrown at her. She remembered her shame, and then the cold swallowing her whole. He didn't ask more. He didn't press. He simply waited until she took another sip before he stood up. "I fixed your porch rail," he said. It was loose. Also put a new lock on the door. Lena looked at him sharply. People didn't fix things for her. People avoided even standing too close. But he just shrugged a little. "You deserve a safe door," he said. "Everyone does." She lowered her gaze. She wasn't used to kindness, not steady kindness, not from someone who didn't owe her anything. "Why?" Her voice cracked. She tried again. "Why help me?" Eli pulled in a slow breath as if choosing his words. "Because no one helped me when I needed it," he said, "and I'm not repeating that mistake." She didn't understand the weight in his voice, not yet, but she felt it. Felt the truth in it. Felt something shift inside her chest. He headed for the door, but paused with his hand on the frame. "I'll come back this evening," he said, "only if you want me to." She didn't answer with words. She gave a small nod, barely visible, but he saw it, and that was enough. Eli visited again that evening, carrying tools this time. A hammer, nails, a new window pane, the kind of things people brought when they wanted to help. not when they wanted to talk. She watched him mend the broken glass quietly. When he finished, he sat on the porch beside her, keeping a respectful space between them. "You don't talk much," he said. She shook her head once. "That's all right," he said with a faint smile. "I talk enough for two." He told her about the car engines he rebuilt as a boy, about the long highway miles he had traveled, about the mechanic shop he wanted to open. His voice was deep but gentle, meant for small rooms and cold nights. Lena listened, not just with her ears but with her eyes, her posture, the small tilts of her head. She didn't speak, but something in her face softened. And little by little things changed. She started sweeping her porch every morning. She opened her curtains. She even laughed one afternoon when the dog stole Eli's glove and ran across the yard with it. The laugh surprised her. Surprised him, too. It sounded like hope, but Dustin Hollow was a town that didn't forget. Whispers followed them. Stares lingered. No one said anything to their faces, but people watched from behind windows. They always had. One icy morning, Lena found a dead rabbit on her porch. She froze. Her body stiffened. Fear flickered across her eyes. When Eli saw it, he didn't say a word. He buried the rabbit himself, washed his hands in the snow, then checked all the windows, all the doors, every corner of the cabin. "It won't happen again," he said. But it did. A cracked window one night, boot prints circling the cabin, a letter nailed to her door with 4 words. "Ghosts don't belong here." The ink hadn't run from the snow. It had been placed recently. Deliberately. When Eli read it, something hard settled in his jaw. He built her a stronger lock, fixed the window, stayed by the fire until she fell asleep. The next day, he walked into the general store and stood in front of the small crowd gathered near the heater. His voice was calm but firm. "I don't know who's been bothering her," he said. "But if anything else happens, anything at all, I will find out. And I won't be quiet about it." People stared at him like he'd swung a hammer inside the room. Sheriff Langley stepped forward. "Careful, son. This town doesn't like trouble." Eli met his eyes without fear. "Then tell the town to stop making it." That night, Lena sat on her porch, hands folded in her lap. Eli approached with careful steps. She looked up at him, her expression soft but confused. "You didn't have to defend me," she said in a whisper. "Yes," he said. "I did." "Why?" He sat beside her, close, not too close. "Because you're not a problem," he said. "And I'm tired of watching people treat you like one." The words settled over her like warmth in winter. She didn't know what she felt. Not exactly, but her heart beat differently now. It beat in a way it hadn't in years. Eli glanced toward the dark woods behind her cabin. "They'll try again," he said. She swallowed hard. "I know." "But they won't win," he added. "How do you know?" she asked. He looked at her with steady eyes. "Because this time, you're not alone." She didn't speak after that. She didn't need to. She leaned back against the porch post, watching the snow fall, and for the first time, she imagined a world where she wasn't trapped by whispers and shadows. A world where someone stood beside her. A world where warmth could interrupt the cold. A world where she didn't have to face the night alone. The storm broke 3 nights later, but the cold stayed sharp. The sky hung low over Dustin Hollow, heavy with clouds that felt close enough to touch. The town moved like it always did. Slow steps, quiet voices, but something in the air felt different, watchful, waiting. Lena felt it too. She tried to ignore the tightness in her chest as she walked the edge of town to buy flour and salt. She kept her hood low and her steps steady, but every window she passed felt like an eye. Every whisper felt like her name. When she stepped into the general store, the warmth inside fogged her glasses. It took a moment before she saw the sheriff standing near the back. Sheriff Langley had always looked older than he was, lines carved deep around his eyes like tired roads. He nodded at her, not unfriendly, but not welcoming either. Cold day for walking, he said. Needed supplies, she answered quietly. He hesitated. You should stick to daytime. Nights are getting tense. She nodded once, though she didn't trust the warning. She didn't trust much from this town. As she walked toward the counter, she passed a small group of men near the stove. They stopped talking when she approached. One of them, barely 20, covered his smirk with a cup of coffee. Another muttered under his breath, "Ghosts out early." She kept walking, but her stomach twisted. Her fingers tightened around the basket. She reminded herself to breathe. Outside, the sky had darkened again. Snowflakes drifted slow and lazy. She pulled her coat close and started back home. The woods loomed quiet, too quiet. Halfway down the trail, she heard it, the sound of boots behind her, slow, heavy. A step she recognized but didn't want to remember. Her body froze. "Going somewhere?" a voice called. She turned slowly. It was the sheriff's nephew, the same boy who pulled her hood down, the same one who filmed her shame. Two others stood beside him. Lena's breath caught. Her heart pounded so loud she could feel it in her fingertips. "We just want to talk," he said. She stepped back. A hand shot out and grabbed her arm. She gasped, twisting, but the ice under her boots made her slip. The basket fell. Flour spilled across the snow in a pale cloud. "Look at her," one of them laughed. "Thought she could hide behind that guy. What's his name? Eli something?" Her pulse thrashed. She pulled back harder, stumbling away from the boy's grip. "Stop," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please." But mercy wasn't something these boys had ever learned. They moved closer. And then a deep shout ripped through the trees. "Get away from her!" Eli, he didn't stop to talk. He didn't pause to warn. He stormed down the trail like a force the winter couldn't touch. His face was cold and determined, jaw set tight. The boys stepped back, startled. The sheriff's nephew scoffed. "We're not scared of you." Eli stared at him with eyes sharp as broken glass. "You should be." The boy opened his mouth again, but Eli stepped forward, fast enough that all three moved back without thinking. His voice stayed steady. "Leave." Now. Silence broke first, then footsteps, then the sound of boys running toward town, their bravado shrinking with each step. When they were gone, Eli turned to Lena. She stood shaking, hands trembling, breath catching in her chest. Her groceries lay scattered. Her coat was dusted in flour. He stepped closer, slow and careful. "You're all right," he said gently. But she wasn't. Not yet. Her legs wobbled, and he steadied her with a light hand on her shoulder. She wasn't used to touch. She wasn't used to comfort. But she didn't pull away. He picked up the scattered groceries one by one. Then he carried everything home while she walked beside him in silence. Back at the cabin, she stood by the fire, staring at her hands. They wouldn't stop shaking. Eli paused at the door. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly. "Just breathe." She closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. When she opened them again, he was still there, not leaving, not judging, not afraid. Her voice came out thin. "They won't stop." "I know," he said. "They hate me. They don't know you." She looked down. "You don't know me either." He stepped closer. "Then tell me." Her throat tightened. "I'm not someone worth protecting," she whispered. "I'm not someone worth." He cut her off, calm and certain. "You are." Her breath faltered. "You don't know what was done to me," she said. "You don't know what I've done." "I know enough," he answered. Silence fell between them. Not the heavy silence she lived in for years. Something softer, something safe. The dog nudged her hand gently, as if reminding her she wasn't alone. She sank down beside him, fingers buried in his fur, tears slipping down her cheeks. She didn't cry loudly. She didn't sob. She just let go in the quietest way, the way people do when they've held pain too long. Eli knelt beside her. "I'm staying," he said, "as long as you want me to." She looked at him through wet lashes. Her voice broke. "I don't know how to let anyone stay." "That's all right," he said. "We'll learn together." Snow tapped softly against the window. The fire crackled, the dog curled up beside them. And in that small cabin on the edge of Dustin Hollow, two broken lives leaned a little closer, not healed, not whole, but warming. Warm enough to change everything. Warm enough to begin again. Warm enough to survive the cold.